Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Cloud EDU bi-weekly webinar. I haven't come up with a more clever title than that at the moment, but today's topic is going to be experiments with Google, hybrid and remote learning ideas. I'm Kevin Sherman, Director of Professional Development at Cloud EDU. And I'll take just a moment to do some shameless advertising pitch for you. Cloud Education Solutions is Google's preeminent provider of education partner services in Southern Africa, and we also have clients in other parts of Africa as well. We do technical deployments, we provide training and professional development for schools, we sell G Suite for Enterprise licenses, and we also sell Chromebooks to the market. So I'll be mentioning Chromebooks a little bit later today. Just a heads up, here in South Africa, we have just reopened schools with students coming. And so I got a little feedback that 2 o'clock was too early to start, but since we'd already advertised this one, I'm going to stick to 2 o'clock, obviously, for today. Some of you may be watching this recording. But I'd love for you to let Temba know, and who's monitoring our chat, if 1500, 3 o'clock in the afternoon would work for you as well. South Africa Standard Time, Central Africa Time. Because we'll still run the next one Tuesday, March 2nd, but I think we'll run that one at 3 in the afternoon. And I'll let you guys know when I send that link in a couple of weeks for sure. So our next one is Managing Cheating in Google Workspace. I hope you'll come back in a couple of weeks for that one. It's always a popular topic. Another event that's coming up in a couple of weeks, we're starting our new series of online masterclasses. If you've ever been interested in becoming a Google Certified Educator, and after last year's experience of probably switching to some online, remote, and hybrid learning, you probably pivoted in that direction. We've got a level 1 masterclass coming up in a few weeks and a level 2. These are not beginner courses. These are for people who've already been in the Google tool set for a while and want to show their mastery of that tool set. And for the level 2 Certified Educator Masterclass, we actually ask that you attach your level 1 certificate to your registration form. And Temba's going to drop a link in the chat if he hasn't already done so. That'll take you to our masterclass webpage. Okay, let's dive into experiments with Google. Google Experiments is based on the technology that Google is outstanding at, which is cloud-based technology, lots and lots of data, huge data sets, and machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I'm going to unpack those a little bit as we go through. There are, however, almost 1,600 experiments. We're not going to have time to do all of those in the next 25 minutes. So instead, I'm going to focus on ones that I think make an excellent contribution to hybrid and online learning. If you want to look for the website, and I'm going to give you a tour, so don't look quite yet, but that's the link you take to experimentswithgoogle.com. That'll take you to the main landing page. And from that landing page, you'll see a collections. And the ones we're going to focus on today are Chrome experiments. I'm going to show you a couple from arts and culture and AR. Sometimes these experiments are listed in more than one collection, so you'll see some overlap there. But you've got digital well-being experiments that might be relevant in today's climate. We've got AR experiments if you're interested in augmented reality, and we also have arts and culture. We're going to show you a couple of those, and Chrome experiments, and those will be our focus today. Let's start out with Talk to Books. Now, Talk to Books uses a new approach to search with natural language and allows you to browse passages from books using experimental AI and machine learning. Now, for those of you who didn't know, books.google.com is the landing page for Google Books. Google Books launched in 2004, and since then, 25 million books have been scanned completely. That's cover to cover. And because it has been scanned, and because of Google's optical character recognition software, OCR, that it's able to apply to that huge set of data, Google's able to return results really easily. And so Talk to Books was developed using machine learning, natural language that's going to be used with that machine learning. And you can get results from your search and filter those results by category. So there are a number of categories that you can select from there. This is an example. I did a search on where do unicorns live, and it returned several different sources. So I've got science and history over here. I've got another science result there. I've got a fiction result here, and I've got history, biography, and recreation and leisure. So those were the 4 results that it returned. It returned more than 4. I've just taken a selection. And you can go and look at those results and see the quotes in the books themselves. Now, I mentioned that this is about remote and hybrid learning activities. So I'm going to connect to a few activities today, and this is a classroom assignment that I would use with Talk to Books. So this is a KWL activity. KWL stands for Know, Wonder, or some teachers use it as what I want to know. I like to use the word wonder. And then what I learned. Okay, and you can pivot that what I learned into what I want to learn about. So you can use a KWL chart as an end of learning kind of informal assessment, or you can use it as a learning scaffold to get kids engaged with a topic. In this example, I'm using it to engage students in a topic. So they're going to open that KWL template. They're going to replace the template with the file name, and then they're going to record 3 or more things that they already know about the topic, and they're going to write 3 questions that they're wondering about the topic. And then I've given them the link to Talk to Books down here, and I'm going to head over to Talk to Books. They're going to ask the 3 questions that they wonder about, and then they're going to record 5 of the most interesting things they learned about the topic from Talk to Books. And they can put that in the KWL chart. If you have a slightly more sophisticated group of learners, or you're doing high school, you might use this as an opportunity and have them put their sources in. So they could cite their sources in that KWL template. That is a Google Doc, by the way. And they could use Google Citation tool sitting in Google Docs to cite their source. So you can ask them to do a little more digital literacy. Now, I just mentioned this template. What I haven't said is for coming today, you're going to get a set of resources at the end of today's session. You're going to get a link to a Google Doc that has all of the links to all of the experiments that we're going to show you today. And it also includes the Google Classroom assignments that I've given, so you can see what those look like, and you don't have to take notes today. You don't have to watch the video over. And then you've also got a link to to a YouTube video I'm going to show you in a moment, and a few other resources. So this is a listing in Talk to Books. If you were going to ask your high school students in particular to cite their source, you just need to be aware there is a view in book link for every citation, for every quote that's returned by Talk to Books, you get a little view in book link there, and that'll take you to the book where that quotation was found, and that's where you would get the information to do the citation from. So that's Talk to Books. Fabricius is another language-focused experiment, but this one also involves art. I would argue it also involves science. You could make a case that involves coding a little bit because it's going to be using machine learning. I'll show you how that works in a second. But Fabricius was actually developed for archaeologists. It's not even really meant for classroom use, although there's some classroom applications because on that play and learn section I'll show you in a moment. But it was developed for researchers, and what it did is Google took data that it had about hieroglyphics, the images, the pictograms, and it applies the language, the translation to those pictograms. And researchers then, instead of having to manually translate, they can use Fabricius to enter a big load of data, and Google will recognize the pictograms and return its best guess at what the meaning of those pictograms is. So that saves researchers lots of time. But there are 2 sections that would be relevant to classroom use, and that's the learn and the play section. I'm going to show you the play section first because it really is more about playing. But the play section allows you to do a translation from English into hieroglyphics. So I typed out, I like to read, I like to drink beer, and it gives me that translation, and it highlights different sections. So the to read is highlighted, and you can see that the 3 hieroglyphics that mean to read are highlighted there as well. So it's a nice introduction for students to understand the history of language, to understand ancient Egyptian history. They can get a sense of what the culture was like from that. So there are lots of ways they can play around with this. You can see that I was also a little playful by saying I like to drink beer, and you can figure out what the hieroglyphics are for beer, which, as you probably know, was invented in ancient Egypt. The section about learn, though, is the one that you would use with learners, and I think you could use it with high school students, grade 7 and 8 certainly, but I would probably use it with grade 4, 5, or 6. The learn section takes learners through a tutorial. So it's self-guided tutorial. The teacher doesn't need to do anything. And it has 3 sections. This woman here is saying there are 3 easy steps. But it teaches students about hieroglyphics. The first step involves having students trace a couple of hieroglyphics. So they practice drawing the hieroglyphics. And after you finish drawing, you get your results, and it tells you what this hieroglyphic is. This one represents Senet, one of the oldest known board games. And Senet means game of passing. And so students get some score. I scored very high. It's very positive scores. So you can mess up and still get a high score. And then another section of Fabricius involves the connection to machine learning. So here we have a particular image Google's going to give you, and it has a number of images in its database that are similar. And then there's an explanation here around how Google Cloud Auto ML, or machine learning, is using the machine learning to help academics. So it says for academics, their drawing needs to be recognized in the top 3 images by the AI. So if an academic researcher submits a drawing, a hieroglyphic, then Google's machine learning is going to match it to the top 3 images and come back with possible results for what those hieroglyphics are. And as you are probably well aware, these hieroglyphics are in many cases 2,000 to 3,000, sometimes older, years old. And so they can be damaged by weather. And so one of the sections of Fabricius's Learn asks students to use repair tools to reconstruct the name of a pharaoh using those hieroglyphics. So it's really cool the way students are guided through this step by step, and they come away having an appreciation for what archaeologists have to do, the work of archaeologists, ancient Egyptian culture, and that combination of those 2 things with Google's machine learning and the application of AI to solve a real-world problem for researchers. Now, Chrome Music Lab is one of my favorites. It's always the one that people find most engaging. I like to start with those language ones because people don't tend to get past Chrome Music Lab if they get into these. There used to be only 13 experiments. Now in the last few months, I don't know which one was added, but we're up to 14 Chrome Music Lab experiments. And I just want to start out with sort of this overview assignment today. So we've got, I'll come to the assignment in a second. We've got ways we can use Chrome Music Lab to teach science, math, and art, the STEAM subjects. Technology is in there as well. History, geography, connecting some of these music connections to culture. We can have students use dance, teach them about live instruments and other musical things. Now, I'm not a music teacher. I know, unfortunately, very little about music. I appreciate listening. So the music teachers out there who are watching, please, I'm sure you'll have lots of great ideas for how this could be used. And if you're watching live, I would love it if you drop those ideas into the chat to share with others. So here's a simple way to get students to enter the Experiments Music Lab, but I have another motive with this particular assignment. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so as I read it, you can see it. So students are going to use the link that I provided at the bottom, and I give them the link in the classroom assignment to make things straightforward. And they're going to use the discussion feature of the assignment itself, and they're going to share the following. So they're going to explore 7 of the 14. You could make it 3, 5, doesn't really matter. But they're going to identify their favorite experiment. They're going to state why it was their favorite. And they're going to provide at least 3 details about the experiment to explain why they chose it. Now, that 3 details for me as a former English and history teacher is really critical. I want students to provide evidence for their opinion, right? Why is it your favorite? That's an opinion. 3 details explaining why they chose it. That's providing some evidence to support that opinion. After they've done that, Direction number 3 says they're going to choose 3 of their classmates, and they're going to look for a different experiment than their favorite. And then they're checking out that experiment, and they're going to ask an open-ended question about what they wrote about. Now, I would have already taught students that an open-ended question is one that you cannot answer with a single word or short phrase. It requires a longer response. So they already have that skill. They're asking an open-ended question of their fellow students, and that's going to spark a discussion, a response. And we want to encourage that kind of response for students as much as we can. And I'll explain why a little bit later. All right, so let's take a look at the first one of these, and I'll give you an example. So we're going to look at all 3 of these, and we're going to start with rhythm. And I'm making a connection here to some reading. I'm going to do this for 2 of the experiments. We got a short story that we've been reading in class, Drum Dream Girl. It's about a Cuban Chinese girl who's learning an instrument in order to be able to produce the music of her culture, and also to be able to be on the same platform that everyone says only boys can use that instrument. So it's one courageous girl's way that she demonstrated how she could change music. This is a really good book. But for some students, this concept of rhythm, something they may not understand, or we want to make that enjoyment of the novel or the book a little richer. So we're going to use the rhythm experiment. I'm going to jump out of my presentation to demonstrate this one. I'm actually going to change gears and use these 2 little ones because I really enjoy them. So we have 3 instruments here. We have a cymbal, which I can add here. I'm going to zoom in on this so you guys can see what I'm doing. So I'm adding to the scales here. I'm going to add this blue drum a couple times, a little regularity. I'm going to put the cymbal in there, and I'm going to drop that cymbal in here. And then we can play. See how this sounds. And if we change to one of the other creatures, we've got these guys as well. I think this one's more, yes, marimba style. And let's keep this one consistent. Let's try that. All right, so that is the Rhythm Chrome Music Lab, and it's one of my favorites because it's got those characters and they're fun. It's very engaging for adults and learners alike. The next one that we're going to take a look at involves this video. So we're going to watch just a few seconds of this video.
Vasya mixed red with yellow, then he mixed red with blue. As the colors changed, Vasya heard a whisper, a hiss, louder hiss, then a louder still hiss. "What's that sound?" asked Vasya. "I don't hear a thing," said Auntie. Vasya listened as his brush stirred and swished. The swirling colors trilled like an orchestra tuning up for a magical symphony. "Mama, Papa," called Vasya, "what a noisy paint box."
All right, so that is part of the noisy paint box, and the link to this video, which includes the entire short story read to you, and that story is read to you, that's going to be in the resources we'll give you at the end of today's session. But let's head over to the Kandinsky Music Lab. This one is one of the ones that I also love. I'm going to start by just drawing a few little shapes, and we will hopefully hear what these sound like once I play them. And you get the idea. Okay. Oh no, I'm gonna reload this because for some reason it isn't sounding at all. Hold on a second. It's a pretty quick one to load. Now all of these Chrome experiments take a lot of data. There we go. So they can be a little bit slow to load. So you can tell that each of these uses slightly different groups of instruments. We had a marimba version. This is the woodwind version. And so you can practice getting different sounds out of those drawings. What I love is when you draw that circle, you automatically get these shapes. And so Google's taking the drawings and it's sort of playing off this idea of Kandinsky's abstract art and the link between color and sound. And you'll notice that where I drew on the Kandinsky Music Lab, whether it was high or low, changed the tone. Again, I'm not a musical teacher, so that may not be quite the right terminology. All right, let's go on to our next. No, Vasya, we're done. Okay, Chrome Music Lab, experiment, shared piano. This one I can't demonstrate for you because it's a shared piano and I'd need to have 3 other people who actually have some musical abilities, and I wouldn't be one of them. So instead, we're going to watch this short YouTube video. You'll get the idea pretty quickly.
Hey, I'm Bree, and I'm in Boston.
I'm in New Haven, Connecticut.
I'm in Queens, New York.
And I'm in Brooklyn. We're going to use this website called Shared Piano to play together live.
You don't need to download or install anything, or even make an account.
It's totally free, and anyone can use it. You just go to the site in your browser and start playing.
You can play on a MIDI keyboard.
And you can also play together on regular computer keyboards, which Bree and I will be doing, like this.
We all just open up the link and start playing together.
I'm the unicorn.
I'm the rabbit.
I'll be the octopus.
And I'm the dog, and I'll kick us off with the drums.
So you get the idea. Students are able to use a number of different instruments. You've got a drum kit, you've got marimba, you got strings, you got these other instruments. But the coolest thing is that in addition to being collaborative, you're able to save your music. That music becomes a single link that gets stored, and you can send that link. Students could return that link as part of a Google Classroom assignment, for example. But they're able to share that music to the world. So you can imagine what a cool and useful app this was during lockdown for people to still be able to collaborate musically. Body Synth, it's the last Music Lab one that I'm going to show you. That one, as you can see from this video, allows you to, sorry, it's not a video, it's an animated GIF, allows you to move your body and create music. And there are different chords, there are different musical instruments you can select, but you're going to be generating the music from the motion of your body. So it's recognizing your motion. And in this case, I've got a classroom activity that focuses on the artificial intelligence. So this one is one I would probably use, obviously, with older students, perhaps students in a technology class or an IT class, or students who are doing coding and robotics, for example. Artificial intelligence makes it possible for machines to learn from experience, adjust to new inputs, data, and perform human-like tasks. Using these technologies, computers and other machines can be trained to perform specific tasks by recognizing patterns in large amounts of data. Experiment with the Body Synth experiment. I've given them the link below. Answer the following questions in the comments section for this assignment. What inputs is Body Synth using to learn from your interaction with this AI experiment? How could inputs learned through Body Synth be used in the real world, in human tasks? And then they're asked to respond to 3 classmates' questions, providing details from your own experience with the Body Synth experiment. So there's that class comments section at the bottom of the assignment. Now, if you're using Google Classroom, you do have to turn on class comments. It's a feature that's in your settings in Google Classroom. When we train teachers, we usually suggest to start off with that they have that turned off. Now, why would you want it turned on? Why promote discussions at all? Well, for one thing, and remember, we're talking about remote and hybrid learning, but I think the same is true in a live face-to-face engagement with students. Discussions engage learners, right? Teenagers, younger students, everybody likes to talk. We're humans, we're social animals. Speaking your thoughts out loud helps to clarify your thinking, and that's a critical thing. When I taught writing, what I learned early on was if I had my students conduct some kind of discussion around the topic of the essay, their products were far better, even their first drafts. It helped to clarify their thinking to talk about things first. Discussions promote social learning, and it gives you, the educator, a chance to promote digital citizenship opportunities. Now, I would never have students engage in an online discussion without laying some ground rules first. So you do need to have some community rules or some safety rules, or engage with students about appropriate conversations and discussions and what you can and can't say. But it's a nice opportunity to teach digital citizenship skills. And then finally, as a lot of teachers found last year, not such a good idea to try to teach 40 minutes in a Zoom call. It's better to have a variety of activities when you're doing remote and online learning. And so even though I have that downtime in quotes, discussions are a nice way to fill that remote learning downtime with meaningful engagements between students. Oops, Semiconductor started too fast, sorry. I'll show you Semiconductor. Semiconductor is one of those, it's another, I think it's in the Music Lab, but it may be somewhere else. I've got a link to it in the resources. But Semiconductor is one that I played with last weekend, and it got me practically sweating. So when you've had students doing remote and online learning, and they've been sitting in a chair for too long, Semiconductor is a fantastic tool. When I used Semiconductor, I found that my heart rate suddenly went up. My Fitbit was telling me I was moving around. It was a really fun way to get going. I haven't given you any great learning ideas for it. Hopefully we have some music teachers in today who can share some thoughts around how they might use Semiconductor for teaching and learning, but I just thought it was a fun one. I couldn't resist sharing it with you. Autodraw comes to us from Google Arts and Culture. No, that's the next one coming up. Autodraw was done independently of Arts and Culture. Forget that. But Autodraw uses machine learning to take a drawing that you've done and turn it into an icon or an image or a picture, whatever you will. Now you're able to copy those pictures and save them. And I know there are other applications that can do this, but it's nice that this one's already sitting in the Google tool set. This is another example of drawing a wave, and you're going to see that it goes up and gives you 3 options for what it thinks you are trying to draw. And you just click, and Google returns the one that it thinks you wanted. So you get some options to choose from. It's a fun one to play for, but it also has a number of really interesting applications for teaching and learning. It's a quick visualization tool. So if students have had a read aloud in the lower grades, or they've done their own independent reading, they can do a quick visualization of the scene that they saw. They don't have to take a lot of time to be a perfect drawer. If they have a math word problem, as a math teacher, you might want to say, okay, I want to help them visualize the problem. So they might sketch the word problem, right? 2 trains are coming at each other, da 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 da. I remember that one from when I took algebra. Sketchnoting. And if you don't know anything about sketchnoting, you can simply Google sketchnoting or Sylvia Duckworth. And I haven't put a link to Sylvia's work, but I'll add one to that resource page a little bit later today. But it's a great tool for sketchnoting. And for learners with poor motor skills or learners who were like me, a little embarrassed about their drawing skills, it still enables them to do some drawing and encourages them to do that drawing. Another idea is to illustrate new vocabulary. So as kids are learning new words, they could quickly use Autodraw to illustrate those words and create a virtual visual dictionary. And that visual dictionary that they could create, so they could auto-draw, they could copy that drawing, they could paste it into a Google slide deck and keep track of their new vocabulary words with a visual dictionary. There's an idea I had for a game as well, and this is one that's nice for teaching about instructions. So the teacher would make the picture. You can use Autodraw to make the picture yourself, and you'd show it to one learner. Now, if I were doing this, I would do this with different groups. I would have small groups, maybe 4 or 5 students in a group. Teacher shares a picture with one learner. Without showing the picture, that learner has to orally describe the picture to a group of learners, and the other group members have to try to draw the same picture while listening to the instructions. And I'm sure you'd have lots of different varieties of things. It teaches students appreciation for how important it is to provide details and to make sure that they're giving good instructions that have an order, that have those details. And so whether it's young students or older students, I think this game would work really well with Autodraw. Draw to Art, this is the one that comes from Google Arts and Culture. And it started with an app. So originally what Google was trying to do with this was create an app. And they asked this question, what if your sketches could help you discover great works of art? And so they came up with this board. This is an electronic board, and they set them up in a museum. I think the first one they did was in Paris. And they had a special room for doing this in, and they had people draw and see what kind of artwork Google Arts and Culture returns. So you can see somebody's drawn a cat, and they're going to get that other image of a cat back. Google then took this and they connected it to their what is probably over 1 million pieces of artwork now that's sitting in Google Arts and Culture. And if you don't know anything about Google Arts and Culture, I promise sometime this year I will do a webinar on arts and culture because it's one of my favorite tools that Google has put together. It's an amazing resource for teaching and learning. But in this case, they've got all of these artworks are connected. Now, Draw to Art is a piece of hardware. It's that tablet that you saw. But there is a version in the experiments, in Google Experiments, called Draw to Art Shape Edition. And what it allows you to do is you have a series of shapes you can draw, and then Google uses that same machine learning. Okay, it takes your doodle and it matches it to paintings, sculptures, and drawings from museums around the world. So this is one where I was actually trying to get a nautical theme going, and Google recognized that I was aiming for something that had a boat or a ship in it. And so that was my huge relief. So how could you use Draw to Art in your classroom? Well, I think you could use it as a story starter idea, right? Any ideas you get from a picture you can use. You could use the shape of the day and see what art pops up. You can generate design ideas from very simple shapes in a design class or a technology class. So it's a nice way to get that link between design and the creative art that's out there in the world. And I'm sure you art teachers can find better ideas than these, so post them in the chat. We're about to wrap up. We've got one more to take a look at, and that's Hopper the Penguin Explorer. Now, I confess, this one really is geared for primary students, but hang on, secondary students, because we're going to post the resource link shortly in the chat. Hopper the Penguin Explorer is essentially a version of Google Street View. And those of you who are familiar with Street View and those little blue circles that you see when you're using Street View imagery in Google Maps, Hopper the Penguin does the same thing. Only instead of having Pegman, or as I prefer to refer to it, Pegperson in the toolbar in Google Maps, when you're using Hopper the Penguin Explorer, you've got a little penguin instead of Pegman or Pegperson. And Hopper can be dropped to any of those little circles. This is Hopper in Jordan at Petra, which is an archaeological site. This is Hopper has been dropped into Zuma Rock in Nigeria. And for those of you listening from South Africa, that's Zuma Rock in Nigeria, not the Zuma that we know. Zuma Rock is an interesting feature, and you can see that it appears on the 100 Naira note here. So when you land at, when Hopper lands in a location, you have two options. You can learn more, the Learn More button. You get a little pop-up that gives you some simple information about the location, and you can take a picture. Once you take that picture, you get an actual Polaroid that you can share. Your learners can share that back to you via Google Classroom. So if you wanted to track their progress as they explore with Hopper, you can do that. They can send it back to the teacher using Classroom. And let me just show you this quick video. Hopper is rather active. When he lands in a location, he starts out by doing a quick dance. And once he's done that dance, if you want to have him move around, you can click in the scene and he'll just take off and start running. And he sort of runs away from you. So he's really fun for students to watch Hopper and to follow him around the world. And how would I use Hopper? Well, I think Hopper is really nice for understanding basic map concepts. If you've never introduced students to Google Maps, Hopper would be a nice way to give them the ability to explore Google Maps without letting them get too lost, because it's defined by certain locations. You can introduce the concept of Street View imagery using Hopper. The Penguin, you can again use Hopper as a story starter. But what I like is this idea of using Hopper as a model. So especially for older primary students, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, they can create their own Explorer tools, right? They can do something like a Hopper the Penguin Explorer using Google My Maps. And if you'd like to learn more about Google My Maps, if you want to get some professional development into your school, we've got sessions as well on mapping tools for Google. Now, what is a link to all of this to advanced coding? For most of these experiments, when you go into experiments.google.com, you'll find two buttons. One button is Launch the Experiment. There's an overview page for the experiment that describes it, and you'll have these two buttons. Or there's a second button called Get the Code. So if you're teaching older students or you're teaching coding and you want to give students insights into how this particular experiment was created, they can click the Get the Code button and actually get access to the code that's running that experiment. And it's a really nice real-world way to get that across to students. I'm going to just see if we've got any questions today. I don't see one way or the other whether we do. I'm waiting for my colleague Temba to tell me, but he hasn't let me know. So I'm going to assume that we don't have any questions today. I'm going to thank you guys for your attention. Temba's going to drop the link to the resource page, if he hasn't already done so, into the chat. And I want to remind you guys that you can find Cloud Education Solutions and contact us for professional development if you're interested in getting something like this at your school. And I will hopefully see you all in 2 weeks for managing cheating in Google Workspace, which is our next webinar 2 weeks from today. Thank you very much for attending. We appreciate it. And I'm going to say so long. Thank you all for coming.